I placed the folder on the table between our 3 plates and said, "I know about the last 14 months. My best friend didn't even try to deny it. My husband just stared at the folder like it might disappear if he waited long enough. But to understand how I got to that table, I need to take you back to the night I found the first text message, the one that started with a wine glass still in my hand." The wine glass was still in her hand when I saw the text light up on his phone. "Same time tomorrow. I miss you already." I didn't recognize the number at first. Then I saw the name saved next to it, and my stomach dropped somewhere I don't think it's ever fully come back from. Rachel. My best friend. The woman who did my makeup for my wedding. The woman who sat next to me in the hospital when I lost my mother. The woman who had a key to my house. I want to tell you this story slowly, because that's how it happened to me. Not all at once. Not like a bomb going off. Like water finding a crack in a wall, one drop at a time, until one day you realize the whole thing is rotted through and you never even heard it crumbling. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that 6 years ago, I married a man named Daniel, and I thought I had built a life that was solid. A house in the suburbs. A dog named Biscuit. Sunday dinners with my parents. And Rachel, always Rachel, at every birthday, every holiday, every ordinary Tuesday when I needed someone to talk to. Rachel and I had been friends since we were 19. We'd been through breakups, job losses, my miscarriage 2 years into the marriage. She was the one who held my hand in that hospital room when Daniel had to step out to take a work call. At the time, I remember thinking, thank God I have her. Thank God someone is here. I didn't know yet that someone would turn into the person who helped dismantle everything I had. Looking back now, there were signs. Small ones. The kind you explain away because the alternative is too ugly to consider. There was the time Daniel started going to the gym at odd hours, always right after Rachel mentioned she'd joined a new fitness class. There was the time I found a receipt for a dinner at a restaurant I didn't recognize. Dated a day I thought he was working late. He told me it was a client dinner. I believed him, because why wouldn't I? Rachel had a boyfriend of her own back then, a nice guy named Marcus who eventually disappeared from her life with barely an explanation. At the time I felt sorry for her. Now I understand exactly why that relationship ended. The truth is, I think some part of me noticed things shifting. Rachel started commenting on Daniel's work stress like she had inside information she shouldn't have had. She'd say things like, "He's just under so much pressure right now, you should be patient with him," and I'd nod, grateful that my best friend cared enough about my marriage to check in on my husband's mental state. I didn't ask myself how she'd know how stressed he was unless he was telling her himself. I didn't want to see it. That's the part that's hardest to admit. I had built my entire adult identity around this idea of we're the stable ones. Daniel and I got married young, while our friends were still bouncing between situationships and heartbreaks. I liked being the couple people pointed to and said, if it can work for them, it can work for anyone. I liked being needed by Rachel, being the friend with the good marriage who could give advice. I think, somewhere quiet inside me, I was afraid that if I looked too closely at the cracks, the whole identity I'd built would collapse. So I didn't look. Then came the night with the phone. We'd had people over. Nothing special, just a small dinner with 2 other couples from the neighborhood. Rachel wasn't there that night, which in hindsight, I think was deliberate. Daniel had 1 too many glasses of wine and fell asleep on the couch before everyone left, his phone face up on the coffee table, notifications stacking on the screen like they were trying to tell me something before I was ready to hear it. I want to be honest. I've thought a lot about whether I should have looked. Some people will say a marriage requires trust, that going through someone's phone is itself a violation. And maybe in a healthy marriage, they'd be right. But I think somewhere, my instincts already knew, and that's why my hand moved toward that phone the way it did. Not out of paranoia. Out of a kind of grim, exhausted recognition, like a body finally admitting it's been sick for a long time. The message from Rachel was the 3rd one down. Above it were 2 more, from earlier that week. I won't repeat every word, because some of it still makes my chest tight even now, months later. But the gist of it was unmistakable. This wasn't a one-time slip. This wasn't a drunken mistake at a work party. This was a relationship. Ongoing. Established. Comfortable. The kind of intimacy that only builds over months, maybe longer. I sat on that couch for almost an hour after everyone left, just scrolling. Daniel slept through all of it, completely unaware that the life he'd built on top of a lie was quietly being excavated 3 feet away from him. What I found wasn't just an affair. It was a second version of my life that had been running parallel to my own without my knowledge. Weekend work trips that were actually weekends at a cabin Rachel's family owned upstate. A recurring calendar event labeled with a client's initials that was actually a standing lunch date every Thursday. Photos Rachel had sent him, ones I made myself look at even though every part of me wanted to look away, because I needed the anger to be real. I needed proof solid enough that I couldn't talk myself out of it later the way I'd talked myself out of every red flag before. The most recent message was from 4 days earlier. Rachel had written, "I hate pretending everything's normal when I see her. I don't know how much longer I can do this." Pretending. In front of me. At my dinner table. In my kitchen, where she'd helped me cook more times than I could count. I didn't confront him that night. I want to be honest about that too, because I think people expect these stories to have a dramatic, immediate blow-up, plates thrown, screaming in the driveway. That's not what happened. I sat with it. I needed to understand the full shape of what I was dealing with before I said a single word, because I already knew that the moment I spoke, everything would change, and I wanted to walk into that change with my eyes open, not blindsided a second time. Over the next several days, I did something I'm not proud of, but I don't regret it either. I became a quiet investigator in my own life. I found the burner email account Daniel had set up, the one linked to hotel bookings I could trace back nearly a year. I found a separate bank account with charges that lined up with gifts I never received. I pieced together a timeline that stretched back almost 14 months, which meant that at my own father's funeral, when Rachel held my hand and told me she was there for me no matter what, she had already been sleeping with my husband for months. That detail broke something in me differently than the affair itself did. The affair was a betrayal of my marriage. That moment at the funeral was a betrayal of grief itself, of the one thing I thought was still untouchably mine. I want to pause here and say something to anyone listening who has been through something similar. The moment you discover a betrayal like this, your mind starts doing this cruel thing where it rewrites your entire history. Every good memory gets a question mark stapled to it. Was that trip actually about us, or was he already thinking about her? Was that night she stayed over during a rough patch in her relationship actually comfort, or was it opportunity? It is a special kind of grief, mourning a past you thought you understood while it's still happening in the present tense. I decided I wasn't going to let them control how this ended. I spent almost 2 weeks gathering everything. Screenshots, receipts, bank statements, even a voicemail Rachel had accidentally left on Daniel's phone that made her involvement undeniable to anyone who might have doubted me later, including, frankly, myself in weaker moments. I didn't do this to build a court case, though some of it later mattered for exactly that. I did it because I needed, more than anything, to never again be in a position where either of them could look me in the eye and make me question what I already knew to be true. The confrontation, when it finally came, wasn't loud. I invited them both to dinner, the 3 of us, under the pretense of planning my sister's baby shower, something Rachel had been helping me organize for months. I remember how normal Rachel seemed walking through my front door that evening, how she complimented the centerpiece I'd made, how she hugged me like she hadn't spent the last 14 months systematically destroying my life one Thursday lunch at a time. I waited until we were all seated. Then I placed a folder on the table between the 3 plates of food I'd spent the afternoon cooking. I didn't yell. I didn't cry, not then, though I cried plenty in the weeks after in private. I simply opened the folder and started reading, calmly, methodically, every date, every location, every message, in the same tone I might use to read a grocery list. I watched Daniel's face go through denial, then panic, then a kind of pathetic resignation. I watched Rachel try 3 different versions of an explanation before she finally just went quiet, staring at the tablecloth like it might offer her an exit. I told them both, very simply, that I was done pretending I didn't know, and that from that night forward, they would both have to live in a world where I saw them exactly as they were. The aftermath took time to unfold in the way these things always do. Divorce proceedings are slow, deliberately so, and mine dragged on for the better part of a year. But because I had documented everything so thoroughly, there was very little Daniel's lawyers could dispute. The financial infidelity, the hidden accounts, the trail of deception, it all worked in my favor in ways that mattered practically, not just emotionally. Rachel, for her part, learned what it feels like to lose every mutual friend we'd built over a decade of shared history, all at once, in a matter of weeks. People chose sides quickly once the truth came out, and very few of them chose hers. I heard, secondhand, that she moved to a different city about 8 months later. I don't know if that's true. I've stopped keeping track. As for me, I won't pretend the year that followed was easy. There were nights I sat in that house alone, surrounded by furniture we'd picked out together, wondering if I'd ever trust anyone the way I'd trusted them. But somewhere in the middle of the rebuilding, I found something I hadn't expected. A kind of clarity about who I actually was, separate from being someone's wife, separate from being someone's best friend. I started running again, something I'd given up years earlier. I reconnected with an old college friend I'd lost touch with, someone who, ironically, had nothing to do with either Daniel or Rachel, and who reminded me what uncomplicated loyalty actually felt like. I sold the house eventually, not because I couldn't afford to keep it, but because I didn't want to keep living inside a memory that had turned out to be false. I moved into a small apartment downtown, the kind of place I never would have chosen when I was building a life around someone else's comfort. And slowly, month by month, it started to feel less like exile and more like a beginning. People ask me sometimes if I regret staying quiet for those 2 weeks while I gathered evidence instead of confronting them the moment I found out. I don't. I think that quiet, careful period was the first time in years I made a decision entirely for myself, without considering how it would affect Daniel's comfort or Rachel's feelings. It was the beginning of learning to protect myself first. If you've been through something like this, I want you to know that the version of you that comes out on the other side is not smaller for having been betrayed. If anything, mine came out sharper, more certain of what she will and will not accept, more willing to trust her own instincts the next time something feels wrong, instead of explaining it away to protect an identity that was never real to begin with. Rachel reached out to me once, almost a year later. A single message, no explanation, just, "I think about what I did to you every day." I didn't respond. Some doors, once you finally have the strength to close them, deserve to stay closed.